So one thing all three of us do, we're consistently looking at excellent brands that are executing very at the highest level when it comes to branding and positioning, all the way to then their content and the experiences. You've put together a framework to evaluate brands and how well and how good they're executing. Break down that framework and then tell me where you find an excellent brand within that.
Okay, yeah. So, I mean, we've been working with, I have a brand studio that works with fitness and wellness brands for the last 6 years. And so often when a brand comes to us and they're looking for a rebrand, it's super important to evaluate what's working and what's not working before we accidentally change something that has been working for them or that their people love. And what we always say is, I mean, we believe excellent brands are found at this Venn diagram, at this intersection of strategy and personality. Because often you see a lot of brands doing all the right things, but they're so vanilla. Like there's nothing to them to kind of grab onto that has this stickiness. And especially in fitness and wellness, I mean, the industry's so saturated, right? So you have to have something that speaks beyond, oh, we have the best creatine. No one cares. Yeah. And so the way that I evaluate a brand, if we're kind of going into an audit, is like a 4-part framework. So first we're looking at strategy. So like market positioning, what makes them clear and different, who is their target audience, and like their USP, their unique selling proposition. The next is voice and visuals, which is what I think everyone thinks of when you think about evaluating a brand. You're looking at logo, color, type, pattern, assets, the visual identity, the tone of voice they're showing up with. Is it unified? Is it consistent? Is it specific? And messaging, like, is there a message, a story, a personality that they bring to the table? The third is execution, which is where I feel like a lot of your all's episodes focus on, like the marketing. Like, let's see this brand, like brand guidelines not put to use are just useless, right? So, the website, is there a clear UX and call to action, content, experience, packaging, product, like engaging with the brand? And then the fourth and final one is perception and presence. So what is the audience's or their consumers' perception of the brand? Are people talking about it? Is there social proof? And then, community. Do people actually engage with and love the brand? And is it culturally relevant? I think some of these brands might check a lot of the boxes in all 3 quadrants: strategy, voice, execution, but people just aren't talking about it. And, without that, what are you,
Do you think there's an equal split as to brands need to be equally as focused on strategy as personality?
I think they go hand in hand. I think it's easy to kind of separate the two, but I think strategy should influence your personality and vice versa. So the personality you're bringing into things when you're building a marketing campaign, it should be like, let's go personality first, but it's also got to be strategic, right? So I think you have to hold the two in the same hand.
Yeah, it seems like the execution piece too. You mentioned that's kind of like something we talk about on the pod a lot. And I think that's why people like the pod sometimes, is because there's a lot of information about branding and how Nike and Apple built the best brand ever that is completely useless to this bro that's trying to start his brand tomorrow. And particularly in the space that you work within, there's really not a ton of difference between a lot of these products. In the electrolyte space, for example, it's like you are winning on brand almost 90% of the time rather than features and benefits. And so I think there's a lot of evaluation stage, right? Where people are like, okay, should we do this? Should we do this? Should we do this? Instead of like, we just made XYZ happen. Like I think it's really important to, like BPN, for example, you're going to a race tomorrow, today. And like their events have been so good for building community, for building, those sort of things. So like, I guess maybe how can people reframe themselves to get more into execution too?
Yeah, I mean, that's the problem too, especially if you're working with tight budgets and you're a smaller brand. You have to be able to be okay with executing imperfectly. Mm-hmm. And sometimes, just like content, like execution doesn't have to be pristine to the brand, as long as you've got like a thought process behind it and it's very strategic. There's a goal that you're set to achieve. Like if you publish like a video on TikTok that just has the TikTok script where you're talking like this, it might outperform even something that is highly produced and heavily produced. And I think the same can go for a lot of, like brand campaigns, you know, so like being okay with, hey, let's go ahead and execute on this thing, because you have to, there's a saying in tech that all my tech friends say, get it to market fast and iterate faster. So in order to test if things actually resonate with your audience, you have to like throw things out and test them. And I think the brand Puresport is a really great example of they're throwing things out quickly. And I think they're getting to the point where they've got some money that like it is highly produced.
They raised a few $1 million.
They did.
Like a month and a half ago.
Yeah. But like you see a lot of their campaigns and they're packing these boxes themselves and like, and they're also taking the opportunity to film themselves packing the boxes themselves. Like you kind of just gotta, you should have a bias towards execution, but just make sure you're not throwing shit at the wall for no reason.
In what stage, I guess, because you're in the strategy personality Venn diagram thing, I guess, like at what point do you recommend something to, like when do you forward it to execution?
That's a really good question.
You know?
I mean, I think I always would love to come to, like when a lot of startups come to us, I would love to just ground up before they even go to market, do everything. Let's take care of personality building. Let's get you a verbal identity, a visual identity. But the reality is a lot of brands don't have that kind of capital or time to invest. So unfortunately, they have to start with what they have, the shitty logo, the whatever, and then just start raising. So I think it depends on what kind of money you're working with, unfortunately. But I think as soon as, in an ideal world, as soon as you have a foundation of like, okay, we know who we are and we've got it on paper, we've got a verbal identity, a clear personality, because if it exists in the founder's head, like that's gonna be difficult to execute and will always be changing as the founder is like seeing new trends and wanting to adopt them. So get it on paper, get some semblance of like a brand guidelines together that you know that you can stick within, and then just start going to execute. And then, you know, as you get some more capital, then you can come back and work with a really great brand studio and say, here's all of our data. Now we have tons of data from the market and these campaigns that we've run. Now go take that and build a better brand.
And I do think so many brands miss the mark on a clear identity and personality. There was a brand we were working with doing, I think in the ballpark of 10 to 20 million, right? And when we were running through a content exercise where it's like more of like a brand content exercise, kind of working its way down from the brand's narrative to then actually what we're going to be creating. And when we asked them about the brand's personality, or somebody on our team, you know, Briar actually asked him, was like, hey, would you say your brand's playful and like funny? And the guy, I swear, was like, fuck no, we're serious, get it done. And then Briar was like, well, then why are the last 8 pieces of content that you've published funny skits?
And
they kind of had like a moment because of the fact that you didn't define your personality and don't define the identity of your brand. You have no guardrails to play within. And
exactly.
The creative team also has no direction to go towards. And I think that's a huge miss, but it's also hard to think about your brand's personality and define it and figure out how to define it. How would you define it for, you know, a brand? I don't want to name brands because it's brand you're working with, so we'll take this part out. But like, if you're going into to work with a brand, you're trying to help them establish what that personality is and figure out and define it and characterize it. How do you do that?
We have a couple different exercises and frameworks that we run brands through, because typically people are coming into things with such a blank page and they say, I don't know, or sometimes they do know, we are serious, we're not playful. And sometimes it's like, hey, maybe you are. So the first thing I kind of like to start with, I call the chaos chart. Have you guys seen that chart that has like chaotic good, lawful evil? It originated in Dungeons and Dragons, but you've probably seen it in a lot of memes. And people use it in Dungeons and Dragons to help establish their character's personality so they know how to move throughout the game, which I think is perfect for brands trying to move, you know, in the marketing landscape. And so we try to say, okay, let's look at good and evil and chaotic and neutral, very tongue-in-cheek. But, you know, for example, Liquid Death, who everyone on a marketing podcast talks about ad nauseum, is very...
We try not to.
I know.
When we were starting out and trying to get views, it was, you know, it was in episode 1 through 5.
Gosh.
Then we passed that. I was like, okay, we got some traction. We have 10 listeners.
Yeah.
It's time to move on.
Everyone
past
on
Liquid
LinkedIn
Death.
is still talking about Liquid Death.
Yeah.
They don't know that it's
LinkedIn
out.
is a solid like 18 months behind this podcast.
At least.
If not more.
Yeah.
If not more.
Like a year.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, Liquid Death is a great example of chaotic evil. And I would say a better example might be Pit Viper Sunglasses. If you've been to their website, it looks like it was built in like 1995 and would give you a virus. There's I don't know if it's still there because I think they redid their website, but there's a button when you go to cart and your cart is empty that you can click that says add a bunch of shit to my cart. And it adds $200 worth of stuff to your cart.
Okay.
Like it's fantastic.
This is on Pit Viper?
on
I
Pit
like that.
Viper.
Yeah.
I like that a lot.
And then if you go to their website, then you'll get retargeting ads on your like Instagram feed that are like, we're in your house. Like that's a lot of brands can't do that, but for Pit Viper, that shit really works.
Yeah.
And then for like, let's look at like AG1 or like seed probiotics. They're very lawful good. Like they're here for the good of you. And, you know, we're science backed.
Right.
You
Trust
know,
us. Yeah.
We've got to like follow
A
the code
doctor
of the
runs
law.
our social media.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But there's still a personality there, right? But it's very like lawful good. Whereas
Yeah.
I say like true neutral is like government websites or like corporate clinicians. There's just nothing on it. So we want to position into one of those quadrants. I would say like lawful evil, like a Lane Norton is a great example of lawful evil. Like, hey, we're going to go, or maybe even a Jocko, like, hey, you know, fuck you, get up at 5 a.m. Or like, we're science backed and I'm going to call you out when your stuff isn't science backed.
like
We're going to stitch that real.
Dictator vibes, but like you kind of like it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Like my dictator. You know? Yeah.
I'm chopping up that fuck you, get up at 5 a.m. That's the beginning of the intro. No context, like just serious. What happens when a brand's stuck at like, hey, I sometimes am lawful good, but I also have a little neutral evil and maybe chaotic good. Like how, because when you ran through Cut 30, you probably remember where like we have different tracks.
Yeah.
Right. And then people will be like, well, I want to be a builder and a expert track. And it's like, no. Like you need to
Stick to one.
What do you do there?
A lot of brands are very dynamic and can, especially different product lines can show up in different ways, even across different platforms. But to keep things simple, especially for smaller brands trying to execute themselves, that's where we bring in brand archetypes, which is a very cheesy marketing thing. You've probably seen them like the Sage, the Outlaw, the Caregiver. But what I tend to look at brand archetypes as like a big three. And so, okay, like in astrology, like what's your sun, rising, and moon, but like your primary, your secondary, and your tertiary archetype. Because when you combine those with the chaos chart, it tends to, okay, now we're starting to see some structure and dimension to this personality. Because a lot of brands aren't like, we are the outlaw through and through. No, they're not.
Yeah.
You know, like we can start to add some structure. So we say, hey, you know, maybe you're a sport performance brand. You're the hero, the explorer, and maybe the Sage, because we're bringing in some like technology and innovation and you know, science backed. And then we actually exist in the chaotic good quadrant. And like we've got a bunch of memes and like funny things we're throwing around. So all of a sudden it starts to build this world of personality around a brand that you can then start playing within. Like now we have some guardrails to creatively execute.
One thing we've been doing with brands where, kind of like you're saying, if somebody's very, let me look at the chart again because we wouldn't use the chart, but like if someone was very lawful good, but they wanted to have a little bit of chaotic neutral. Yeah. It's like now we could introduce a character for a campaign, right?
Yes.
We could introduce somebody for 30 days or for a quarter or whatever that is that and brings that to life, but it doesn't change the entire brand's narrative or how you're perceived.
Exactly.
Because like this person's here temporarily or they're just like that person in the brand. Almost like any show that you watch that there's that person that's the unhinged friend. I'm gonna go with I'm about to out myself, but like if you've ever watched Outer Banks, definitely outing myself here.
That's cool, dude. You're married.
Yeah, it's like she wanted to watch
anything on your TV
She
is
wanted to
like
watch
you got plausible deniability.
That is so true.
It is.
Yeah, you're good.
But there was this guy JJ on it where like he was just the guy that was chaotic. In this case, like chaotic good, I would say like chaotic. Yeah, like chaotic good. But it's one character, but it doesn't change the whole perception of the show. And I think brands could do something similar.
And that's where, if you're a super small brand just trying to establish some guardrails, stick to like just one and get that right. But if you're a larger brand that's trying to scale, you can add some dimension to your brand by saying, okay, now we're going to introduce, typically I look at it like, hey, let's go with your tertiary like brand archetype. Like, let's lean into the explorer this summer for a brand campaign. Like, you can lean into that. It still feeds into your overall brand narrative without detracting from, okay, we're going, you know, way out of left field with like the magician or something that doesn't even feel like us.
Yeah, we just had to do this with Jocko because like what you were saying, Jocko's known as being very serious.
Yeah.
And he has that personality where it's hard to break it and break the mold of what he's known for. Right. And almost like the internal team as well as like, like he's seen as like this like mythic individual. Right. And because of all the content he's created, his podcast and all the things that he's done, I mean, he was a SEAL, like all of those things. And so for the launch of one of their most recent proteins, it was like a new flavor. It was coffee and donuts. We introduced a new CEO that was like the more playful person. And then it was the chief experimentation officer.
Genius.
Right. And like with that, we were able to kind of have this more playful personality that even intertwined Jocko, where like Jocko's being like the hard ass and on him about it, but like this person was then able to play the other side. It was
This is so smart because what a lot of marketing companies would do is come in and be like, oh, that's right, we want to be playful. Okay, we're going to set up Jocko in a funny skit.
Yes.
And then you're going to like kind of ruin this like
demean him
mythic
almost.
demeanor that he's established, which is not what you want to do. So
all.
introducing another character is brilliant.
And now we get to use him whenever, right? Like he's a character of the brand, and like any new flavor launch, we get to build skits around him. But kudos to the Jocko team because they took it and listened and like saw it from our POV of like, oh, okay, if we introduce this, like that's a good move for us. What I wanted to do next was you have a giant list here of different brands that, if I had to guess, these are brands that have the potential to be excellent brands. Some of them are already excellent brands, but there's some that are probably maybe doing a few things that you're like, hey, like I would do X, Y, Z. What I would love for you to do is start running through this list. We could spend like 4 to 5 minutes on every brand because I think there's a list of maybe 10, 12 on here. Run it through your evaluation, run it through your framework, and kind of tell me like what could they do better, or if they're doing amazing, like what are they doing that's amazing?
Yeah. Let's start with Goodr Sunglasses because I've had my eye on them for a while, and I have a couple pairs of their sunglasses because they're cheap. They're $40 a pop. They mirror what you might get from like Oakley. So they're like constantly matching whatever trending styles are, but they're easy to run in. They're made to be functional, affordable, fun eyewear. So they have what I would call, they fit squarely in that chaotic good camp, which is perfect because they're a more affordable brand and that's kind of their angle. You can have a lot more fun when you're not trying to be high end. So there's so much room to play. Where I think they kind of fall flat is they've got this like mascot that they use that's a flamingo, like Kevin, that they try to introduce in ways that I'm sure is supposed to mirror like the Duolingo owl. And in the packaging that you're opening, they talk about Kevin packed these sunglasses, but it just doesn't, like they don't use it enough. They either need to go in hard like Duolingo, or they need to like find another lane because it just really, it feels almost like too playful and too childish where I'm almost embarrassed to interact with Kevin the flamingo.
Yeah,
personally.
like I wonder who likes Kevin.
Exactly.
I don't really.
Does anyone?
I don't like Kevin off rip. Like
Yeah.
I'm out on Kevin. And so
Kevin's a little cringe.
yeah, because
and
you're right. It's like Duolingo already did this, you know. So if you're not going to twist it, like this just looks like a direct rip. So if you're not going to twist it and like, and
Or
you're right,
find your
they
new
don't lean
angle
in.
with the mascot. I feel like
Exactly.
the angles with mascots, and I'm seeing this even with like hydration brands. Like everybody's running. If you have a mascot, you're running a marathon in your mascots thing, and like everybody's kind of doing it. And I know we're going to talk about Puresport, and they did it, and I love Puresport. Like I love y'all know this. We talk often, but I do think that everybody in hydration is kind of doing the mascot play. And if you are going to do the mascot play, you have to find your angle.
And you've got to commit to it and have that live in like almost every piece of content. So it's not like, wait, why am I reading about Kevin the flamingo on these sunglasses I just bought? And I think there's just so much room. They just launched it looks like Instagram page for sports Goodr.
Okay.
Like there's so much room for them to sponsor some athletes. They had like an athlete partnership with Alexi Pappas, who's like a well-known runner. I think she's an Olympian, which is perfect. So they have these little lines, but like they need to be doing more. And going, I think they need to go even more left field and even more chaotic. So that's my, but I think there's so much potential with the Goodr brand.
This is the type of brand that can scale something that's like street style to the moon, because they are more playful and they can get away with a ton of volume, that it would work, because you land on their page and I mean, it's just like, there's a lot of like what feels like just Canva type content.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And it's very promotional. It's very just like in your face with the sunglasses. And where you go back to, it's like they have the personality to be playful, but it's not, when you go back to actually creating a specific perception, like content's going to form that perception. And they're not putting enough content out there to form that specific perception. I'm there with you. I think the brand, I almost think like this is like a Buttery Bros brand.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Buttery Bros is such an excellent example of a brand that just does constantly pushing personality at every front, which that's partially because the people who are running the brand are just dripping with personality. But sometimes there's founders who have so much personality and they don't know how to execute it. You get these Canva graphics that they're putting up and it's like, why are you doing this? Yeah. And I mean, if you have a brand where you can be fast and loose with the personality, like, oh my God, lean into it for the sake of the rest of us who have to deal with these very serious AG1 brands.
For sure.
Yeah.
What's next on the list?
Do you want to, we talked about Puresport. You want to talk about Puresport?
Yeah, let's run through Puresport.
I think Puresport is doing such an excellent job at navigating this. Okay, we're a supplement brand and we've got to be high end and performance oriented, but they have a ton of fun with their brand campaigns. Yeah. And anytime they have like an in-person brand activation, they just do it so well that community just buys in fully because you get to know the people. And I think that's what a lot of these like supplement and sport performance brands kind of miss, especially in the building phase. You've got to get people to buy in before, because there's so many supplement brands that say they have the best creatine. So like that's not enough.
Yeah.
What I will say, I think in scaling, I'll be interested to see how they can scale beyond just constant brand pop-ups and activations. Like I would like to see some of that messaging like really baked into like the website, all the marketing like offshoots that are beyond interacting with the person. Like how do you take that, we're at a Puresport event, that feeling and bake it into everything? I think that's going to be the challenge for them. But I mean, so far, no notes. They're doing a great job.
I think the brand that does that well, and I know it's on the list, is Bandit. Like
Yes.
Bandit does and we'll touch on it later. One thing I love that Puresport's doing, I think you and I talked about this on the pod, I don't know, maybe 5-6 episodes ago, where, and Rode does a really good job. Rode Beauty does a really good job of this, where you launch something or you have a specific theme and you kind of do it in sequences of either 3, 6, 9, or 12 posts. Mm-hmm. And like you can tell that, hey, there's a campaign going on, or there's some story being told here. And they did it really good for the London Marathon. And so for context, Puresport's in the UK. And so if you go down, you're going to see this sequence of content, and maybe it's like 15 to 20 something posts. But they did an amazing job of telling this sequential story where there wasn't even color theme, right? It was like this neon, kind of yellow, green, played into their roots of them as a brand. They're from the UK. London Marathon's big for them. But the thing that I love that they did, and I've been talking about this more and more, where there's like TV shows, right, that brands are creating, like social shows. Mm-hmm. And then there's like campaign series, which is campaign series is a little different, where it's more high end. And you're telling things through an episodic format, but each episode's like this different story. And they did this for the London Marathon, where they did like the hotel drop off, which was, delivering supplements and delivering like the socks and all of this. Did you see that one?
Yes, which by the way is so smart, because vendor village at a marathon is just an absolute nightmare. Yeah. You're going to get so lost in the sauce that they were like, we're a small brand. How do we go directly to the athlete and kind of make again with that cultural relevance. Like, how do we stay culturally relevant when we're drowning in vendor village? And this is an excellent move.
I love this. And they had the card load, the joys in the journey, and they basically put out these like really dialed, very well-produced pieces of content for it. But they did a lot of good things. I think they're, like you're saying, they're very good at like in-person activations and like doing a lot of things that are like just great guerrilla marketing tactics, where they hung a sign from the London Bridge. They had a lot of other things where they put like roadside recovery ahead. Almost like, when we're driving in Texas, like you always see all the Buc-ee's billboards and stuff. And it's like, it was very similar to that, where it was like roadside recovery ahead. And then they had like these fuel stations for people to be able to recover and take the electrolytes before the marathon. But then talking about that sequence of like 12 to 15 posts, and then you look at the one that they just did for watermelon.
Yes.
It was like a whole nother personality, a whole nother vibe. But going back to it, it's like, it was, if you look at the black and neon, this one was just like red, in your face, beautiful. Like they do a very good job of telling these sequential stories on their feed.
It's almost seasonal too.
Yeah.
I feel like, we talked about the brand as mood board move, and this is mood board, yes, but it's also like seasonal emotion. Like the watermelon is, for the summertime. They have this like bright neon yellow for the spring. And then what was interesting to me was it's very muted white colors for the wintertime.
Yeah.
And it's like they're kind of taking you through all these different associations that you have with your senses, which is cool. But just to close it out, I mean, I think it's really interesting how their products could not be more commoditized. Like everything that they sell is available on Amazon at the same quality level for 80% less. And they're able to show up, like you're saying, in places where their customers are. And that's, building a company, and that's the true value of being good at this stuff. A lot of people will say like, well, what's the ROI of a brand marketing investment?
Right.
Well,
a question I get all the time.
Why does this brand even exist? They have no ability to exist without these investments.
Exactly.
And so that's why you want to pay attention to this stuff, because it's like pretty dope when it actually works out.
And I mean, back to when you were talking about like execution versus like really dialing in the strategy and visuals, like Puresport is a great example of, they have to be a certain level of branded, and because they're not a Goodr, they can't be fast and loose with it. And you see a very clear creative direction for every single phase, which I think is really important to know. You have to prioritize creative a little bit if you're kind of a company at the stage of like a Puresport.
The last thing I'll say about them is, when you talk about execution and then you're talking about strategy and personality, they have that dialed in where they're executing things very, very fast. Like the London Marathon to the I don't remember what marathon this one was for, but they had those campaigns dialed and like executed and were shipping extremely fast, which is good. Like when I think about a brand you should be modeling Puresport, where your personality, you have your strategy dialed, and then you're pumping out things. It's not a once every week we're posting a piece of content because we got to stay relevant type beat. So Puresport, another great. What's next?
Let's talk about, do you want to jump to Bandit?
Let's do it. I'm with it.
Okay.
We've never talked about them on this podcast.
No one ever talks about Bandit Running. Yeah, they're not doing anything. Yeah, Bandit Running is just, I am so obsessed with them, so I feel like I can't be as objective as I want to be, but it's just because I've had my eye on every campaign that they've dropped. There's such a good example of a like New York, like Brooklyn-based running brand that has dropped things like socks and apparel that you literally could buy anywhere. Yep. In such a beautifully like art directed, intentional way. On their website, if you go to kind of like the B-roll, I think is what they call it, they've got just breakdowns of here's our mood board behind this specific, like their shoe launch, for example, has like, here's the Japanese art that inspired like the tongue on the shoe. And I'm just so deeply obsessed with that. I think maybe you guys have talked about going deep with your brand, like creating moments for people who are like true fans of a brand, who like, if they want to go deep and dive deep, there's moments of delight that they can find themselves in that is difficult to do when you're a smaller brand. And I think they do such a good job at like, the marketing with the quick little shows, and keeping things very like art directed and high end at the same time.
Yeah, it's the B-mail, and I love
The B-mail.
what they do with that, because for the Chicago Marathon, like they did a great job with the Chicago Marathon, like the capsule for it. But if you went to their website and you actually consumed content around the Chicago Marathon, they did that. They took you through the mood board, they took you through the inspos, like behind the capsule, creating the capsule, all of these different things. One thing that I love that they do, that's an Easter egg, is they're obviously a running dominant brand, right? And if you go on their site, anytime you scroll, have you seen that it adds?
My God.
Yeah, it adds how far like you've scrolled, right?
Here's how many Ks you've scrolled. Yeah,
exactly. So like I'm scrolling now, and it's like right now I've scrolled 0.081 kilometers. You know, and that's such a subtle Easter egg that nobody else is doing, but that is so fitting for the brand.
Yeah,
and they're also a brand that the art direction lives everywhere. When you were talking about brands and being able to scale and keep that same experience that maybe you have on social to your website and bringing that across the board, it's every touch point, whether it's email, whether it's on the site to then their content, all of those touch points feed off of each other, which is huge when we're talking about the actual perception somebody creates around or about for you. And that's the reason they're able to command $150 for a shirt.
Exactly. Well, and you got to think about like why this art directed, like going back to their strategy and their market position. Like they are a brand that is a like I want to rep this brand as like, this is cool kid status because I've got the Bandit logo on my socks. Like you clock someone else with Bandit and you're like, oh, okay. Like I know we're the same type of person. Creating kind of a status symbol brand, you've got to be this intentional with every single, like that's what they're building.
There are levels to it. And I think you just nailed it, where your goal is to become a status symbol brand, where you wear Bandit and you're kind of out with other runners, or you're out in a place and it's like, oh, like he's dripped out top to bottom, or she's dripped out top to bottom in Bandit. And like, you kind of have a specific perception about that individual, how they live, what they do, what their lifestyle is, how they train, what car they drive, like all of that just based on what they're wearing.
Have y'all seen this Bandit Grand Prix?
I'm so obsessed with it.
This landing page is pretty insane.
So like,
You talking about the homepage, or is it a different landing?
It's the homepage.
The register now one?
They have a landing page with like an aerial view. They do like an aerial zoom on the event venue, and it's labeled Bandit Grand Prix.
It's very F1 coded, which falls so perfectly in. I think what Bandit does well is they're very high art, but they're playful. They've got some like humor.
They know exactly who their consumer is.
Exactly.
And a lot of people struggle with that. They ask, who am I even for? And Bandit is an example where like so many runners probably think they're pretentious and probably think it's like, I don't need to wear this shit. Like
She just made a whole video about this.
Really?
Oh, people
pretentious
got
running era.
mad.
Yeah.
People were pissed. They're like, we don't want, running should be for everyone.
Yeah, totally.
These brands aren't saying that running shouldn't be for everyone.
No,
Like,
100%.
get out of here.
But they are like extremely unnecessary, is what I would say. Like
lot of these
in a
brands
sport where like there is, it's not a lot that you have to do. And I'm saying this as a good thing.
No.
Right? Like I'm saying that their success is impressive because they know exactly. They've got like 20% of the running market that wants more elevated stuff, that wants to engage with storytelling, that wants to just consume everything about the sport. And they don't care about the rest of the 80% whatsoever.
Yeah.
And that's clear in everything they're doing.
Yeah. Especially since that market is so saturated. You have to choose a lane. And so that lane can be a little more inaccessible.
I see them and I just think Soho, right? Like and I think their store is in Soho, but like before, even if they didn't have a storefront, I picture what it would be. And I forgot who I was talking to about this, where it was like, well, if we're thinking about your brand, like what would your brand taste like, or what would they drink? What fragrances would they wear?
Yeah.
What vibe what club would they go to? If they were going out on a Saturday night, like, are they going to a speakeasy or are they going to Club Live in Miami, right? Like those are different personalities. And when I think about them, it's like, oh, I'm shopping in Soho. I'm dressed nice. I'm getting like a $8 espresso, right? Like there's all those elements that I'm thinking about.
And that's the brand's
$8 espresso this morning in Austin, bro. That inflation's crazy.
It's 2 hands.
Yeah. God damn.
And I mean, that's where like that brand strategy is so important, especially as you're launching other brand campaigns. You can say, okay, we know our target consumer so well, And then you can even launch a brand campaign off the back of what are they doing on Memorial Day weekend?
Yes.
Like this person who drinks $8 espresso and might be like, what if they're drinking Coors Light, or, Coors Banquet, at the side of like a Grand Prix kind of race. Now let's launch a campaign off of that.
The overlap of the Coors Banquet crowd. Shit.
So specific.
They're chilling in their trailers right now.
I feel like it's...
you got to run that one off.
It's trendy, though.
Really?
Like I feel like that's the Coors Banquet is like the...
That really is like the pretentious running era too, right?
It is.
It's like, I'm going to drink this fat beer because I'm so skinny.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah.
I could see how this gets down. Like this kind of reminds me of like if ALD had a beer, like Amélie on Dior, because it's like
that's way too much neck for ALD, bro. You got to throw some respect on Coors' name.
No, but I'm saying like if the person who's drinking it,
yeah,
like the colors,
he had a
light
waxed
gold.
mustache in 2014.
Yeah,
he watched Mad Men and he told you it was the best show ever.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's you
Won't
know
stop
exactly
talking
who
about
this
Breaking
is.
Bad 10 years later.
Dude, I like this little.
You're describing me.
Well,
he had to get back at you.
Funny thing about Coors Banquet beer is I know a couple guys, they're building a brand around, kind of like one of their brands is called Rough Rider. The other one's called Base Living. Like they're building it around this cowboy outlaw aesthetic. And speaking of knowing your customer, they know that their customer is not actually a blue collar guy.
Yeah.
It's actually like the city guy who longs for, the Western aesthetic and like the Americana kind of heritage stuff. And it's funny, like Coors Banquet beer, it's like drinking a Coors Banquet when you don't love a Coors Banquet is a highly performative act. Like
I want to do. I'm telling you, I want to do this.
Like I've probably deleted at least 10,000 beers in my life. This is not an enjoyable beer, and because it makes you really full. But at the same time, it just looks so good in your hand, and it's like a signal, like
this is sick.
I could ride a horse.
Yeah, like on the beach, like
yeah.
This podcast is sponsored by Coors Banquet.
Yeah, jeez,
that would be great.
That'd be amazing.
Yeah.
What's next?
Let's go on to another one.
Let's actually talk about one that's kind of out of left field. There's not much to audit here, but a swag run club based in Argentina. So a run club, like run clubs as brands, is this new concept where all of a sudden, a run club will launch, they'll get really popular on social, and then they'll be reached out to by the likes of Puma and Nike and Adidas for like brand deals that are pretty significant. And so like swag running, I had a conversation with these guys based in Argentina. They're like, hey, like the running scene has been booming in the States for a while. It's new here. And we're like first on the scene. And if you look at their like short form videos, it's excellent. Like their aesthetic is so dialed.
Yes, it's good.
Their graphics are gorgeous. And what they just got a Puma partnership, which I find interesting. And the way that they launched it is absolutely brilliant. Their kind of messaging is House of Outsiders in Buenos Aires. It's just like, it's dripping with like swag, honestly.
Something about them that is extremely underrated. There's been a few guys that have done this really well is the playlist. So creating a playlist for like, that's the next extension of world building is like audio. There's obviously visual set, whatever, but that's cool that they're kind of creating a world through a soundtrack, Exactly.
And thinking about what are the ways that a run club type brand can show up if you're not based in Buenos Aires? How can you engage with this brand? And when you have, like, there's obviously something here when Puma is reaching out to be like, we want you guys to launch our new running shoe, like in Argentina, and we're going to give you the dollars to do it. Where I think there needs to be a lot of like, these guys don't know how to measure the metrics around, hey, here Nike or Puma, like here's how much engagement I'm getting, here's how many eyes we're getting on different things. Like they don't really know how to monetize and turn this into a brand super well, but the bones are here. And I think there's a lot of run clubs across the globe that are in the exact same position that I'd be interested to see how they can turn it into something else.
I do love their art direction. I think from what it seems like, they're monetizing better than most run clubs on like the sponsorship partnership side with Puma. I think this Spotify playlist that they made called Swag Track, I think this was definitely a paid partnership. Like they definitely gave them a budget to go produce in studio. I don't know if you guys saw this, but like it is a beautifully shot announcement of their playlist.
Yeah.
Because we stopped the cap on this episode, the one thing that I'm a hate on is they copied Minton New York's launch video for Saucony.
Okay, that is very fair. Which I think you see with like a lot of these small brands. They're like, what do we do? Okay, we're gonna look at this big player and copy it, which
it's to a T. Like, I don't know if you've seen, do you know which video
Yeah.
I'm talking about?
I didn't even clock that, but you're absolutely right.
Like, yeah.
Which,
to a T.
especially in
It's a cold world.
in the viral era, you got to know that like these big guys will see you and you will get called out.
The
if you
algorithms are so
copy.
good. Like if something has 200 likes but used like the same, like there's this bro that always pops up. He does like content every clothing brand should make.
I know, and it's always my hook.
Yeah, and it's like I see his video at like 110 likes, and I'm just like, damn, the algorithm wants to expose people. Like,
Yeah.
it
There's
really
one
does.
page that any video I make that gets over 100K views, they're gonna rip it.
Yeah.
You
And
can
I
name 'em. You can name 'em.
always, I
Fit Insider.
yeah.
Yeah, you can name them.
And it always pops up, and I'm like, well, there it is.
Yeah,
There
I've been
we
getting
go.
a lot of LinkedIn profile views from that brand as well. But
They want you.
I don't care.
Your face is gonna pop up and start ripping my content.
Yeah, probably.
There was a funny episode that we, I don't know, 2 months ago where we called out some people. Like, we didn't say them by name, but we said,
But everyone knows.
yeah, and they would know too that we were talking about them.
Yeah.
Where like I had a specific segment on the pod, and then he ripped it word for word into a short form video.
Genius.
Right? Yeah, ripped into a short form video.
I'm gonna
it
start
was his
doing that.
most viral clip, and I called him out on the pod. Again, didn't name him.
Mm-hmm.
I knew he knew because the next like 2 days later, 3 days later after the episode released, he unfollowed me. And I was like, oh,
on.
that is, yeah.
That's where
You're
if,
pissed.
if you find
Petty.
yourself in that situation, take your video down, go message
Yeah.
the person and be like, hey man, I'm so sorry, it won't happen again.
Yeah.
And
It
that's
was-
how you move forward.
It was funny. I do think though this brand Swag Running or Swag the Run Club,
They've
they
got
have
legs.
it. They have it,
Yeah.
and only for having like 8,000 followers.
I know.
Like,
I'm just trying to resist the Argentina peso stuff. I'm just, it's going to be hard to monetize. That's all I'm saying. It sucks.
where do you think? And this is almost like a little different part of the convo, but how do you think these run clubs are actually monetize even more outside of partnerships?
This is where, so talking to the guys at Swag, I don't know how much I can share, but they're talking about, okay, let's bankroll some of these partnerships into some like concept store community hubs. And I think that's where these can really start flying. Which a brick and mortar is difficult, like monetizing something digitally. You see kind of what Bandit Running has done with their run program. Like you could launch
Hit me with, is it IGLU?
IGLU. Let's talk about IGLU. So iglutherapy.com. They're essentially Plunge in South Africa. And so I had a call with the founder, Kate.
In South Africa?
Yeah, in South Africa. I had a call with the founder, Kate, last week, and I wanted to talk about this brand because they're a great example of like a smaller brand with an incredible product, but Kate is doing everything.
Yeah.
She's doing customer support, she's doing marketing, and essentially she and her husband started this company because she wanted to buy a plunge tank and ship it out to South Africa, and they're like, sorry, we can't do that. So she was like, great. I'll start this company. And now, she's got these stocked in different gyms in the area. She's got like partnerships, I think, with some like High Rocks and some other events. And what I think when we look at their website and their social, like the naming structure and the way that their product looks is so high end and their brand doesn't match that. And she's aware of it. So,
Yeah.
we can talk about it, but this is where it's really important to prioritize great creative for your brand when you have a product that's this good. And I will say too, with their messaging, there's a lot of the power of the cold plunge. Everyone knows for the most part why they need to.
If you're in the market for a cold plunge, you know why you're buying a cold
You
plunge.
know why.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
she needs to dial in on that story of her founder story and then what's their specific angle. They have this really cool naming structure that kind of came from the words that mean ice and cold from like native languages. That's very interesting. You can lean into that with the graphics and visuals, with all of the messaging, and create kind of this brand that, again, create like a status symbol brand.
Yeah.
Like, I'm the cool kid that's not buying Plunge because that's too mainstream. We're buying Igloo Therapy.
I fully agree on the fact that they look so elevated, but they don't need to be talking about a nervous system reset.
Exactly. The sales cycle to get somebody who doesn't know the benefits of cold plunging to buy a cold plunge for their house is just,
It's kind of a waste of your time.
Yep.
There's like so many people that are ready for it.
I think they really just need to play into an aspirational lifestyle. Like there is the plunge, and for people that are probably competing in something, like they're having plunge, it's like the legacy brand. But if you're building, for example, a very nice, like I see this and I think about the person that builds like that elevated garage gym. They drop 30, 40 grand on a garage gym on like having like wood panels and having specific lights and all of that. Like this is the cold plunge for you, right? Like we're we're looking for houses right now. And the one thing that I was looking at, or I wanted to do was, okay, I want to do like the light wood cabinets with like white marble countertops. I see this and I'm like, oh, this is the plunge that would match my house.
Yeah.
Like it would match that specific look that I want to have and then that I want at
And back
present.
to like brand strategy, think about who is buying for the most part. Like you're an aesthetically driven person, but it's going to be the wealthy, like elder millennials and like moms who are like driving the ship on this. Like we want something aesthetic, we have the dollars for it, and we're going to pay for this. So you can lean a bit more, like don't go sport performance, like lean a bit more feminine and aspirational lifestyle with this.
Yeah.
There's a thing that I run through anytime I'm trying to determine like a brand's content strategy. It's just called the grid test. Like I look at the first 15 things published, because typically, yes, maybe it's ideal to publish 30 pieces of content in a month. Most brands aren't publishing 30 pieces of content a month unless they have a super dial team, right? The BPNs of the world. And so by looking at the first 15 posts, you could just start establishing content pillars, the themes, the different formats, the types of content, all of those things. Me just taking a glance at this, I don't want to say they don't know what they're doing. They don't know what their content strategy is, though.
Yeah,
They're trying, you kind of said at the beginning, where they're throwing shit at the wall to see if it sticks, but they're just throwing shit at the wall and not seeing if it sticks while also looking at data. Mm-hmm. Right?
Like a good example is they have like a chill the pause, like menopause post.
Yeah.
And the woman in it is like clearly a young woman.
They're trying to figure out who that like core customer is. And my advice here would be you do have to find these 2 to 3 content pillars that you're doing over and over again. Like, and especially if it is the founder who's spending all of their time on this, like you finding your core 2 to 3 content, that slipped out of my pocket. 2 to 3 core content pillars is going to be great for you because you are always going to know what to create around. And you don't always have to come up with like this net new idea. And I even look at their content, right? Where Meet the Founders episode 2, you were talking about that they need to be establishing kind of the story behind the founders. Mm-hmm. Just because this is more cut 30 advice coming out. Meet the Founders episode 2, like that doesn't need to be your hook. And then also who is Ice Bath thing for is like the next 2 seconds. You've already wasted the valuable and precious time that's in your content and in those first 3 seconds versus just getting right into it. So just little advice there.
And honestly, Kate, because you're watching this, just join Cut 30 and then you'll get all of this for you.
Hopefully, yeah. If she could join, we will
join Cut 30 and then I'll do your brand.
We will take care of it.
Yeah, we got you.
You want to hit BPN? I know you got to ultra this
so
weekend.
As long as I don't have a running like raging fever tomorrow, my goal is to run 50 miles out at the ranch at BPN. But I mean, the ultra that they're doing is such a great example of like they are launching, we were talking about this before the podcast, but they're launching like great brand activations constantly, like all the time.
Yeah.
And they're creative. Like I'm on their SMS, I'm on their newsletter, like even like the ads, like the Instagram, like story ads that you get after you're on their website, it is all like the creative is so dialed and their story is so strong. Like it just oozes through every single piece of content you consume from them. And I not a lot of brands have an internal creative team that can crank that out, but oh my God.
They do.
Maybe they should. Like maybe prioritize your creative more because it's impressive, honestly.
One thing I love about BPN, and I use them as an example often, is anytime I'm running through a content exercise with the brands, I'm trying to establish and find what that brand's narrative is. When I talk about brand narrative, I'm talking about how do you want somebody to perceive you? And so what is that story that you're telling, or what is that motto, that that, I don't want to say slogan, but like really that motto of, hey, I identify with that. Like I follow that. I believe in that. We share similar values because of that motto, right? Whether if we look at an extreme level, it's Nike, just do it.
Yeah.
Right. And it could be that underdog that's like always battling against the person that's the top person, and you just have to do it, and you have to excel, and you have to get better. And BPNs is go one more, right? When you have that, it makes it so easy for you to have guardrails as a brand for all of your creative and for all of your ideation.
Yep.
Because that is your North Star. And without that North Star, you can have, again, like one idea that's super funny and not really relevant and doesn't feed the idea of go one more. Or you could have one that fits perfectly within the guardrails and it amplifies this brand narrative.
Yeah.
And that's super important, where people rally behind the idea of go one more if you follow BPN. And they've done it because they have content pillars, whether it's around Nick Bare and him. I mean, if you really just think about the idea of documenting him saying, hey, I'm going to run a 2:30 marathon, and he shares 16 episodes like that, him becoming a dad, opening a new HQ, running a business, dealing with all the bullshit. And like, he still quote unquote, like goes one more and achieves that goal, to then the actual athletes that are competing for their thing. Those are the filters, or that idea, that slogan is the filter and the guardrail for everything, down to the creative that you're saying in email, SMS, down to, how they activate at a marathon, or to the last man standing or their ultra that they're doing.
And what I think, I talk about this when we work with brands on establishing and creating a verbal identity. It's so important. I think we tend to be so self-centered, like as people and as brands. Like, you've got to make sure that your slogan and one-liner is something that people want to literally tattoo on themselves. And that's what makes a really strong, that's go one more. Like, Nick Bare's entire story is about going one more. Yeah. But so can, his like 45-year-old couch to 5K, person who's like, and we're going to go one more. Like, that's a strong tagline. And I think that's really the juice of why BPN works so well, is because they've got the aspirational athletes, but they very much speak to anybody who wants to do something and wants to work hard.
Because it's really just take one more step.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's if it is the couch to 5K individual, it's, man, you just ran for the first time in 10 years, like you ran 0.3 miles, go 0.31, right? Like, and that's such a simple message that the person that aspires to be the person that eventually runs a half marathon or a full marathon and then an ultra marathon, like they can look at that and know, hey, I'm getting closer to that by taking that one more step. So I agree with you. I think they're probably out of one of the most, if not the most dialed brand here in this list when it comes to creative and full-on branding and how everything feeds off of each other. One thing I always have to tell brands when we're working with them is, like, if they're bringing us on to lead their content strategy and then even go develop some of the content for their brand, don't put us in a silo, right? Like, don't think of organic content as,
oh my God, yes.
Yeah, as like, hey, this one thing that goes and lives by itself and is, we want to be great on social. It's no, you want to be great as a brand. And organic, to the way I see it, is it's the nucleus of the brand, because it's where people are spending the most time with your brand. Mm-hmm. If I publish, let's say it's Marketing Examiner, and I publish 60 pieces of content in a month, and I put out 4 newsletters, what in theory is kind of more important for how somebody is going to perceive my brand? It's the content.
Yeah.
They're consuming way more content, even if it just averaged 10-second watch time. Like, that compounded over 60 pieces of content is a lot of time spent with my brand.
And when you think about it in silos too, that's where you see these like large corporate brands who have socials where it just feels so disconnected from their overall narrative, because they're trying random trends. They're hopping on like the demure versus whatever. And those are the brands that we get sick of, brands that feel authentic. Like, you are operating within your brand guardrails and guidelines of personality and tone of voice and visuals, which is why I think often when I have people come to me to work with brand, they're really interested in social media strategy, because obviously you want money in your pocket and you want to see some videos pop and go viral. But like, you have to have some semblance of a framework of your identity before you just jump into social. Otherwise, what's a viral video going to do if it is completely different than, the core of who you are?
The way I talk to brands about this as well is, if your organic is very dialed and you have the volume that you should be hitting on a consistent basis, that should then be influencing email. It should be influencing SMS. It should be influencing your landing pages and your ad creative. It should be influencing all of that because, one, there's free data points, right? Like if Puresport or any of these brands, BPN, puts out a specific piece of content that's very narrative driven and it performs very well, that is an easy data point to then go to email and be like, hey, let's try this because the market is saying this is something we resonate with. And you can go to email, twist it so it fits natively within your email strategy, but you have this data point that is telling you that you should do this. And then I also look at it as like organic and performance marketing need to coexist, right? They shouldn't be operating in silos. They shouldn't be two completely different things, and they shouldn't have two completely different strategies. Organic is almost like the testing ground for paid, but it also should heavily influence, like you don't want your brand to feel like two different brands on social, and then when they get hit with your ad. And that happens more often than not.
A lot.
Yeah.
A lot of brands that are great at social. I've gotten some ridiculous ads that come through on Instagram stories later or what have you.
And it completely shifts your perception. Whereas I always tell the brand, like, hey, if you're paying all this money to create this perception on organic, but you're spending even more money on paid, because the reality is like most brands the brands at least we work with are spending 6 to 7 figures a month on paid. If you're spending all this money in paid to make an impression and get in front of all of these individuals, it has to be cohesive. It can't feel like this other brand, right? Like you want to be paying to get in front of millions of people and knowing you're putting your best foot forward in front of those millions of people.
Because to that person, like the paid ad is almost like, hey, you've been consuming our stuff for a while. Here's the ask. Like we're extending you. And it feels like it's from the same person. And it should feel like it's from the same person who's extending you that invitation. And when it feels so different than all the other content you've been consuming, you're like, who is this? I'm not going to take this invitation from this person I've never met before.
Yeah. And BPN is one of the brands that they do an amazing job of it. I've been getting hit a lot with their YouTube ads.
Yeah.
They've been doing like a lot of good top of funnel, middle funnel on YouTube. And it literally just feels like one of Nick Bare's YouTube videos, versus the typical content that people get from ads. You want to hit, I think the last one on here is Beam.
I have been aware of Beam CBD since its inception. I think they were one of those brands that launched out of the CrossFit space, like really heavily, which is how I became aware of them. And now I think their most recent launch was with Beam Kids. They launched a kids line, and it's been really interesting to watch the evolution of a brand that started in CrossFit and like started niche and then went broad to Gen Pop. And not a lot of brands navigate that successfully. I think GoWad is another recent one who like started in CrossFit, launched, they had a rebrand and launched.
What would you
Gen
classify
Pop.
these guys as? Like lawful neutral?
I would, that's
It's
such
just,
a good
it's so like
question.
2010 brand coded.
It is 2010 brand coded
You
with
know,
that, the
just
logo type specifically.
Minimalist, millennial packaging, stuff like that. But I agree because that lends itself to be able to expand based on people reviewing the product positively.
Yeah, I think I would say this is kind of a lawful neutral brand, which allows them, and I think CBD in itself, like they're not, hyping up this like clinical science-backed whatever. It's very much like, it's experiential. Here's the experience of good sleep. Here's the experience of, this lifestyle that you want. They're so lifestyle driven. And I think you've kind of seen it shift from early days, like get sleep to perform good, like, Matt Frazier, now to like, hey, we want to live the best life for our kids and we want to get good sleep and have, a healthy lifestyle. And so I don't know what they're doing behind the scenes, so I don't want to just throw out criticisms because I love what this brand is doing and how they've navigated the space. I think sometimes when you scale up, you can lose some of your original personality, which might have to happen, but I think instead of losing personality, you might need to just pivot a little bit. So I think there could be a little bit more personality that they bake into the brand to really help it pop. But that, that's not a huge criticism because I know they're navigating like an entirely new landscape.
But they used to be hot. Like I would say that they used to be hot, and then I don't hear them in conversations anymore. And when I don't hear a brand in conversations anymore, that's still like a pretty big brand. I know it's because they're not creating good content.
Yeah.
You know, like you just know it off rip. The brand that I think needs to be studied is doing an amazing job, and they've done it since they were like a small upcoming, I mean, since they launched really, or a pre-launch, is Salt. Drink Salt.
Oh my God. The amount of DMs I've received about, have you seen this electrolyte brand?
So Henry hit me up like a year and a half ago because Henry actually worked at Puresport.
Oh.
And so he left Puresport.
Okay.
And he had told me, he's like, hey, I'm working on this new brand. He's like, it's going to be me and my best friend. Da, da, da. And I didn't think twice about it, but like you hear so many people kind of say that, and him and I just chatted. And then I start going on LinkedIn, actually, like you said, and I start seeing Drink Salt popping up. And then I see the face. I'm like, oh, like I've talked to Henry, like we've texted, and I start seeing it's him. And I'm like, oh, they're nailing it on so many fronts. They have the strategy dialed. Mm-hmm. They have the personality dialed. They're like kind of this fun, unhinged, but still luxury, not tailoring towards like, you need to be the best athlete possible and this is going to enhance your performance. Like it's hydration made simple, which I would say is pretty generic, but then season your water. I love the idea of seasoning your water.
They should put that in their Instagram. That should be the tagline.
It's in their Instagram, but it's at the bottom. I think it should be at the top, but I think they're using it as their CTA. But everything from the typography to the like, oh my gosh, I cannot say that word.
Iconography?
Yeah, I cannot say that word today.
Iconography.
Iconography. Is so dialed. And I love what they're doing on the social side. 34 posts and 17,000 followers, like dialed.
Decent.
And they also know how to rip things in a very good way. And what I mean rip things is like Rode did that phone case that had the peptide on the back, right? Or what was it, like a lip balm or a lip something?
Like lip gloss?
Yeah. And then they did it because that got patented. And so they actually did it where it was like, they made it where you could put an electrolyte stick pack on the back.
So smart.
So they're just one brand that I think when you think about the idea of personality and strategy and executing fast and still being a lean brand.
Yeah.
This is how you do it.
They're doing it well. I will say, I hate LinkedIn, but it is so slept on for a lot of founders. Like Puresport, like I think the CEO is always posting updates and it feels authentic. It doesn't feel like LinkedIn thought leadership that you hate.
Yeah.
And you're just kind of getting in front of different eyes in the industry in that way. Not as much for sales, but just for like, again, like social proof. I think a lot more founders should be like posting updates on LinkedIn.
Agreed. Anything you want to end with for these brands that are going to hear all of this, what they should be doing, what they shouldn't be doing, how to kind of find that intersection of strategy, personality. What are your last remaining thoughts?
I think hearing all of this, especially if you're a brand founder and you have a lean team or it's just yourself, you can fall into analysis paralysis, just like you do and you guys probably see with social. Like, get it to market fast and iterate faster. Don't just throw shit at the wall and see what sticks, but like try things and try it for long enough and look at the data and then see what's working. And make sure you just use this framework to back up what you're trying and what you're creating. Like, don't just throw things out because you saw a trend that worked for another brand. Like, just on a piece of paper, develop your brand voice and your brand personality, give yourself some guidelines, and then just go run with it. It doesn't have to be a huge, large-scale operation, but just start with that strategy and like get it to market and then iterate, rapidly.
I love it. Tatum, appreciate you being on. This was great. We've been needing to do this. I know Brian probably didn't want to hear all the fitness brands.
This is great. I loved it.
You care really about the like hyper specific niche that I also care about, and there's maybe 3 other people in the world who care about it. So it's always fun to talk.
I'm like 3.5. I mean, I care. I just I've taken supplements before, and I just don't really. I sell more supplements than 99% of people in the world. And so maybe I'm a little jaded in like the whole concept, but no, I thought it was great. Good. I mean, and this is all like super tangible stuff for people to take away. So
now you guys are helpful. Just not going to publish it and then ghost me.
We're publishing.
Yeah,
we're publishing.
We would never do that to you.
Yeah, we're publishing.
Yeah.
But thanks, Tatum.